So I'm Tony Anscombe from Eset. As you can see, I'm a global security evangelist, which in the UK doesn't kind of bode well. I live in San Francisco, so the word evangelist belongs to my title in the US. When I lived in Europe, I was called an ambassador, which is a much better term, but the US Immigration Department, unfortunately, didn't like me being called an ambassador. Yeah? You can imagine the frown I got when that was on a form. Anyway, so we're going to talk about artificial intelligence, or specifically machine learning. Artificial intelligence is a wrongly used term in the security industry. If we sat here and we went through lots of what are defined next-gen companies, this next generation of cybersecurity companies, they all use this term artificial intelligence. Yeah, great. Carry on using it, it's just hype. It's not actually what they do. Yeah, they use machine learning. Yeah, so I'm just kind of bringing it back from that whole AI topic. So what is machine learning? Now, I sat through the keynote. Anybody who was in the keynote this morning, I didn't realise that you could speak for an hour trying to define the word intelligence. Yeah, and then I thought at the start, I've got this definition of what I'm talking about, which probably is in some way wrong compared to that keynote this morning. But it's about classification of objects and the observations of how they act and what they're doing. Yeah? Now, this next-gen thing is interesting. So does everybody understand what I'm talking about when I talk about next-gen cybersecurity? Is everybody, right, okay. So basically you've got this cybersecurity industry that's been there for 30 years. So Eset's a good example of that. I think you mentioned John McAfee at the start of your talk. Yeah, another company that's been there for about the same time. If you look, there's some historic cybersecurity companies that look for malware and look for threats in the wild and protect people. Then about 3 years ago, these new boxes started to appear as machine learning became viable because storage was cheap, processing was cheap, there was a certain amount of data available on the market. Then next-gen appeared. And unfortunately, where I live in Silicon Valley, you had all these venture capitalists throwing money from their wallets to anybody that said the word next-gen. And you got a bunch of these companies start, and they said, we can solve all your cybersecurity needs with one of these next-gen boxes. You don't need AV, you don't need client software, you don't need this, that, and the other. All you need is one of our boxes. It does next-gen, it does everything by machine learning. It's absolute rubbish. Yeah, it's absolute garbage. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later with a couple of really good examples. So, does cybersecurity need the silver bullet? Do we need one form of protection? Just interestingly, so how many people are in the room? There's about 12 of us in the room. Do we need one silver bullet to solve cybersecurity? No? Sorry?
It sounds right.
Well, it does sound good, doesn't it? I mean, if there was one solution, it does sound like a good idea. So we asked people this. We polled 1,000 people. And we asked. Now, interestingly, you can see there's a distinct difference here between the US and Europe. Yeah? The US clearly think that AI and ML are going to be the silver bullet to the cybersecurity issue. I have my own thoughts on this. I believe what happens is great ideas come from Europe. They go to the US to be funded. Yeah? Is there anybody from the US other than me here? Right, I apologise in advance, all right? Right, well, I live there, so I'm here, yeah, so that's good. We're kind of all... I believe stuff goes there to be funded, and it's developed, and then what happens is it comes back here to Europe, and people think about how to deploy it. And they put it into real scenarios, and they use it in the way actually it should be in a managed environment. In fact, you were talking about risk management systems, etc. And I think that's how technology actually rolls. If you look at how things happen, the American market typically is that early adopter market. They kind of go through that teething pain, and then it kind of moves on. So I think that answers this chart. But as you can see, clearly people do think it's going to be a silver bullet. That if you look, the same respondents were clearly confused, because the same respondents said that it's just hype. So while nearly 2/3 of people said that AI ML could be the silver bullet, then they also turned and said it was hype. Yeah? So clearly there's a big confusion about this entire market. And if we look a bit further, do people understand the difference between AI and ML or no? And that's why I started saying there's a huge difference here between AI and ML. And I question whether actually you use the term AI. I use AI, ML. Downstairs they were talking about both. I think we do, yeah, that first hour of the day where they were talking about definitions, maybe there should be a definition. Yeah, maybe there should be clear definitions of the difference between the two. So we also asked about whether their endpoint protection products are already using machine learning. Now this is super interesting because this is really positive. People understood that their endpoint protection products now are using machine learning and artificial intelligence in them. So this is a really positive chart that people actually understood that actually this is already deployed in their security as they're using today. But what about the cybersecurity market? Well, if I started listing headlines, even if I just took today's newspapers, if I started searching just on today, I could fill up pages and pages, yeah, of cyber threats, attacks, and David said that there's those that understand they've been hacked and those that have been hacked but they don't understand they've been hacked. I mean, everybody's been hacked. So just curiously as people, who's been involved in a data breach? You mean
as
personally. Personally or at work. Yeah, so you're wrong. I can guarantee at least 80% of the people in the room are some way involved in a data breach. Yeah, your data has been stolen somewhere. And this is the part of the internet we don't see. Anybody visit the dark web on occasion? Other than that man sat there. Yeah. So do you know how much data costs? Right, it's $9 per 100,000 records of validated email addresses. So I can virtually guarantee everybody in this room, your email address is out there somewhere on the dark web for sale. Yeah? That's how spam lands in your inbox. Somebody is buying data, yeah, or you're giving your identity away way too freely. Yeah, it's one of the two. But this is not going away. You know, the threat is not going away, and the threat is very much real. Just out of interest, has anybody had a virus recently? Does anybody? No. See, that's a good topic. Nobody ever asks that anymore, do we? We all used to get virus infections. Nobody tends to get infected anymore. Well, unless you're from the NHS and have WannaCry. Anybody from the NHS? No. I'll come back to the WannaCry. And that was a very, very specific example. Yeah, and actually, it's not that negative to the NHS either. So, the numbers on the top of this chart are unique virus samples, yeah, by year. So as you can see, when I mentioned next-gen vendors right at the start and machine learning and AI in our industry, would anybody like to hazard a guess where it was really implemented? Would anybody like to think about where actually, if you're a cybersecurity company, you had to have machine learning in your product? Well, it's clearly between 2005 and 2007. So up until 2005, yeah, there were unique viruses appearing, and they were appearing at some accelerating rate. But in 2005 to 2007, this is a huge jump. A massive jump. If you weren't using some form of behavioral, heuristic, machine learning algorithm in a cybersecurity product, there is no way you could classify 5.4 million samples. And bear in mind that that's probably around 3 million growth year on year. So it's not new. Yeah? And in fact, if I look at Eset's own deployment of this, because we've been around for 30 years, you know, we're a good example. We put in neural networks in 1998. Now, the reasons the cybersecurity industry never talked about artificial learning or machine intelligence is because it was too complicated for people to understand at that time. If somebody had started talking about an artificial intelligence product or machine learning back in 1998, people would have gone, what? Is that going to work? You'd have had this skepticism. Marketing people didn't want to use it. And that's why it was never used in the cybersecurity industry. So we and many others already had this technology in there. And if you look at the growth of malware, yeah, it continues to grow. Now, interestingly, we don't get infected by viruses in the same way. And like I say, I'll come back to that WannaCry example in a moment. But you know, if you look, this chart is not, it's not going in any specific direction other than up. Yeah, and we'll continue. And this comes from AV Test, so an independent source, a company in Germany that collect malware. That's not all they do. I mean, they don't just sit there collecting it, obviously. So how does it work in cybersecurity? Well, there are three main ways that machine learning is used, either supervised, unsupervised, or semi-supervised. Now, with supervised, you have humans involved in this as well. So you're categorizing malware, or in fact, you're not necessarily malware, you're categorizing samples that come in. They could be clean, they could be potentially unwanted, or they could be malicious. And then humans are training the algorithms to make sure the classification is right, and that the machine learning algorithms are putting them in the right place. So you've then got unsupervised. Well, the problem with unsupervised is malware doesn't conform. Yeah, cyber criminals are very clever, and cyber criminals will write things that look right and do the right thing, and not necessarily do the right thing in 60 days' time or 90 days' time. They can hide. They will obfuscate things. So therefore, we've got this problem that the unsupervised might not work perfectly. So maybe the semi-supervised is a good place to be, because there are some characteristics that you may understand about a sample, not all of them, but you still need some human input. So maybe it's a mix of the two. And actually, we use that mix of the two in our machine learning system. So should it be simple? Should it be super simple to understand? You know, should we have the bad guys on one side? I'm not saying wolves are bad. You know, you might be a wolf fan, I don't know. Or wolves fan, yeah? No, soccer joke, no? Yeah, or you might be one of the good guys, the sheep. However, it's not that clear cut. So there's malicious and there's clean. And then you have this line in the middle of potentially unwanted. And potentially unwanted also means potentially unsafe. Anybody ever downloaded something that suddenly puts toolbars on their machine, starts popping ads, or, yeah, we've all done it. Yeah, we all download something that then starts behaving wrongly on our machine. Something that displays lots of ads or displays different things in Asia might be a useful application, might be accepted. Yeah, in Europe it's not. It might actually breach privacy laws in Europe. In the US, people just might not like it. So there we've got this grey piece in the middle in cybersecurity that actually is it malicious? Maybe not. Is it unwanted? Definitely. And in businesses, that's super important, because you don't want machines filled up with this unwanted crap, to use the best word probably. So if we look at how to categorize something, well, this is a reasonably good way of looking at it. The characteristics are often similar, so between something that's good and bad. And I'll give you an example here. In 2002, there was a virus written for MSN. Remember the bulletin board? Anybody old enough to, other than me? Yeah. The MSN virus displayed adverts within the MSN chat window. So it was a piece of adware. Yeah. It's malicious because it was doing something that actually it shouldn't have been doing. Yeah. Was it malicious, i.e., was it stealing data, or was it? No. So whether it was in that unwanted space in the middle. In 2007, nearly every website advertiser in the world used part of the code that was in the MSN virus to actually do analytics in advertising. So there's a great example of how something you categorized in 2002 as really bad, which would be on the other side, and by 2007 it's on the good side, yet it's using the same code. So this categorization is not as simple as it sounds. If only it was, if only it was, then cybersecurity, well, David and I probably wouldn't be making as much money as we make, because cybersecurity would be simple. And you'd have this world where, it would be fairly simple to put the sheep on one side and the wolves on the other side, and our learning process. Well, in this example, we've got one on the wrong side, but our learning process should correct that if only everything was that simple. But one of the things that the security industry suffers from are false positives and misdetections. Does everybody understand what a false positive is? So a false positive can be worse than a malware attack, without question. If somebody comes in and stops access to a corporate system because it's got a false positive in it, so it's been detected as malicious, so if suddenly you can't access your email system or you can't access some business critical application, if I put that on a production line, a car manufacturing production line, and I take down the entire production of a car manufacturing plant, it will cost millions and millions of dollars. So that false positive is actually really, really bad. Now, if I have the same false positive in other scenarios where machine learning is used, it's probably not as bad. So now we've got this criticality in cybersecurity and how this whole thing works. And of course, then you get misdetections. Misdetections like WannaCry, which we will come back to. Not by us, I should point out. But you get a misdetection, and again, it can be devastating. It can be truly devastating. Now, one of the things that next-gen providers turn and say in their machine learning and their AI solutions is that actually you never need to update. We've built this algorithm, you just plug this thing in and it learns from what happens on your network and it continues to protect you. Well, that's not true, is it? Because if you've got things that are in this grey zone and you've got false positives and you've got misdetections, then the one thing you need to do is continually update. You need to continually look for the different characteristics. And it can be fooled. Machine learning can be fooled. So, what happens if I put the wolf in a box and I pack the box, and now I'm looking at the box and I put sheep on the side of the box, am I looking at a sheep or am I looking at a wolf? Anybody ever get packed files in their email? Zip files? Packed files? Of course we do. And that's what happens. Or you could argue some forms of PDF are packed. Macro files, they're all packed in different ways. So suddenly viruses can hide. Then you get imitation. Looks more like a Halloween picture, doesn't it? But if you look at the other components around here, suddenly this does look like a sheep, but it's not actually a sheep because it's a wolf in sheep's clothing. And we see that. Does anybody know what NotPetya was last year? NotPetya was a ransomware attack last year. It happened mainly in the Ukraine. However, this was a global issue because the infection spread from the Ukraine through a number of international companies. Now, the cost of this ransomware outbreak is estimated to be $1.3 billion, because of the infrastructure it took down for people like Maersk, FedEx, even Durex were not safe that day, quite literally. So there was a huge amount of issue, but this attack was living in an update. So cybersecurity professionals will all stand here and I'll tell you should update your system whenever there's a security update or whenever it says please update. Please update. because it contains vital security patches, it fixes vulnerabilities, etc., etc. In this instance, the malicious malware writer had got into the update server of a company called MEDoc, and they had Trojanized the update. So the ransomware was actually in the update. Now, the reason it was so devastating to Ukrainian companies is because it's a piece of software that allows you to do your tax returns and file your taxes. So virtually every company in the Ukraine runs this piece of software, which is why it was so devastating. It was, it was hiding in the update. It was making you believe it was a normal update. Other good examples, Stuxnet. As I say, the picture of, Stuxnet is interesting for two reasons. One, actually it was machine learning and anomalies in network traffic that allowed it to be identified. The malware was so aggressive that actually it spread. So this was an infection on an air-gapped network. So this was on a network that was not connected, but what happened was the malware was so aggressive, it ended up spreading off of this air-gapped network, and suddenly then it started spreading worldwide. Security researchers see the anomalies in traffic through patterns and machine learning, and hey presto, then we find they've detected Stuxnet. Now, the other part of this that I think is interesting, that is also around maybe how data is looked at, is Stuxnet was very clever. So the writers of Stuxnet caused the centrifuges to break down. Yeah? Now, they caused them to break down by replaying the log data. So what it did for the first 30 days, it collected the log data from a centrifuge. Then for the next 30 days, it played it back. So the administrator's collecting this lovely data stream, which even if you had this wonderful system that was looking at patterns in the data and et cetera, was going, yes, everything's fine. The administrator was sitting there going, it's wonderful. Meanwhile, the centrifuge is going, and breaking down on the floor, and the Iranians couldn't work out why they were going wrong. And I believe they went through about 1,600 centrifuges before they actually detected what was wrong, that the log files were wrong. So my point here is, it's the quality of the data that goes in depends on the right decisions to be made on the way out as well. So AI and machine learning were kind of involved here. The weakness of machine learning in cybersecurity is only based on the knowledge we know, static environments, updates are needed just like with AV, anomaly detection, etc. But malware is also a business. So, and I was curious, David, you went down this path of the bad guys using machine learning. Yeah, and I'm kind of with you on this one. So I'm going to take you down that path as well. If you look at malware over the years, you had, and I'm get to here. If you look at the early malware, it was about disruption. So 1980 to 2000, and there's still some out there that's disruption. And this is not strictly true, because the first piece of ransomware was, anybody want to guess actually when the first piece of ransomware was? It was in 1989. It was the AIDS Trojan. And it was a very clever piece of malware. It was on a floppy disk. I think it was on the 90th use of the floppy disk. It printed a ransomware demand. And what it had done is it encrypted the file names on your system. So it was a very early version. It printed the ransomware demand, and you had to mail a check for $189 to a PO box in Panama. Yeah, bit different today's ransomware, but it was already there. And then you've kind of got the true monetization side of this. So since 2000, this has become a business. So I would say prior to 2000, and this is where I kind of draw my line. It was malicious for the wrong reason. It was malicious for the wrong reasons. It was the person wanting to cause the disruption, be known for putting a poem on somebody's machine or whatever it was. But then in 2000, it monetized. Yeah. Suddenly, somebody realized that actually malware could make money through adware, through ransomware, and it goes on through data breaches. I said already, you can buy data freely on the dark web. In fact, you can buy ransomware as a service on the dark web. So if any of you here wanted to start your own ransomware business this afternoon, I wouldn't do it from the UK, by the way, because it's against the law. I'd move somewhere else first. But if you wanted to do it, if you wanted to be the disgruntled employee, you could. You could get a unique strain of ransomware this afternoon. You could get a Bitcoin payment this afternoon. You could buy some data. And for under $200, you'd be in business. Yeah, frightening, isn't it? And well, I actually have another presentation where we look at the dark web and how easy it would be to do this. And frighteningly, I gave the presentation at RSA last year, and somebody didn't attend the very start where I pointed out that this was a kind of spoof presentation and a business plan. Actually came to me afterwards and turned and said, "Are you looking for investment?" And it was like, no, I'm not looking for investment, but the business model is actually quite good, yeah? And if you wrap it in a different way, you could call ransomware, well, it's encryption until you want your data. I'm going to keep it safe just until you want it. Then you pay me. Yeah, I mean, there's different ways you could wrap it up. But my point is, this is monetized, and it's monetized in a really bad way. And it's not going away. Now, with monetization, you get aggressiveness, and these people are running businesses. Now, what actually drew my attention to my original presentation on this subject on monetization was over Christmas of 2016, a specific strain of ransomware went quiet for 2 weeks. So if you look at the statistics from our research lab, it disappeared. Now, it disappeared for the fact that I think they took a holiday. Yeah? I think it was the end of year and somebody sat there and turned and said, "We've done our number, all go home." And I think that's probably what happened. And then you start thinking, well, if it's a business, does that mean they've got people sitting there doing email campaigns, people doing web campaigns, and they've got people doing writing content? And it is. And then if you look at ransomware as a service, it comes with Google, an analytics dashboard. So when you buy a piece of ransomware off the dark web, it will come with an analytics dashboard. You can see who's infected, where they're infected, what countries it's working in, what countries it's not. My word, this starts to sound like Google Analytics for your own website. Yeah? So suddenly you've got this monetization in here, which means that it's running a business. So when you're running a business, guess what? You look at new techniques and you look to future-proof your business. So could machine learning and AI be used against us? Well, the question is yes. Yeah, I think as you alluded to, it's probably going to be used against us in a bad way. Now, if we look at actual detections, and in fact I think I've got the UK on here as well. Let me put the UK on here as well. You'll spot that everything is monetizing. So these are detections across the last 30 days from our website called Virus Radar. Now, those among you that are, anybody a Bitcoin owner? Yeah, a couple of Bitcoin owners. I don't suppose you drive a Toyota Prius, do you? No, you'll understand in a moment. I'm looking for somebody that owns Bitcoin and drives a Toyota Prius. No, it's not an electric car. Consider yourself an eco-warrior? Little bit? Yeah, I'm trying to find one that's. But you'll see on here, coin mining is a big threat. Yeah, so coin mining is a big threat because if you look at the amount, and I'm kind of digressing from my machine learning piece here. This is I've got 2 slides of rant. Okay, Bitcoin doesn't work. Yeah, Bitcoin doesn't work because it uses too much power, and that's why coin mining is such a prevalent piece of malware because it's so expensive now to mine. That actually the two are crossing over. So where you could make a profit, if you look at retail electricity prices now and coin mining, the two have just crossed. So it's becoming questionable whether you can actually make profit at mining. So as you can see, it's super, super expensive. Now, if I put this in numbers, like I say, I'm digressing on these 2 slides, so just bear with me for a moment. If you look at these numbers, this comes from Digiconomist. If you look at other sources, and this is based on wholesale electric cost, not retail. So if you look at retail electric cost, this is where those 2 top numbers become the same. So that's why coin mining is becoming so prevalent, because if I can steal the resource and steal the electricity off your machine, suddenly then actually I can I can do it for free. But these are the really interesting numbers. These are the really interesting numbers. How many households in the US can be powered by coin mining? If you turned off coin mining, 6.7 million. The same number of transactions on Visa, 17,000. There is something wrong with this system. So you will see coin mining remain prevalent because it's so expensive to mine, and it's becoming more expensive. Anyway, moving off that, smart buildings. So I think we're about to hit this huge explosion. I think we've seen nothing yet. If you look at how we're using the internet today and as businesses, we're about to go into that 5G and connected sensors, and we're about to go into this whole new world. If you look at, does anybody work in a really modern, super ultra modern building today, where the lights turn on as you walk through and the air conditioning knows it? Right, yeah, there's a few of you. They're smart buildings. And somewhere in your building is probably a control center, and they can tell you how many people are in the building. Not because they swiped in and out, because the building knows.
I'm afraid it's not that smart.
Okay. But it
has sensors to like black down the glasses and stuff.
Yeah, and it's buildings will become more and more smart. The best example, I think, actually is MGM. The hotel casino group. MGM have some really big hotels, and they're in really smart places, like deserts. Where actually, if you air condition them, it's super expensive. To air condition a casino in the desert. By putting in smart building technology, they wiped nearly $100 million off their electricity bill. In 1 year. So, will people deploy smart buildings? Yeah, of course they will, because it's a cost saving, and and it's more efficient. It's a better environment. The air quality is better for employees, and et cetera, et cetera. So, this huge amount of data is going to come out. We're going to have sensors everywhere. We've also got our normal networks. And suddenly, it's all available to the bad guy. As well. So, in the bottom of everybody's office here, in the bottom of this building is a room that looks like this. Now, that's a plant room, isn't it, in the UK? Or what we define as a plant room. Every office has it. It controls the HVAC system. It controls the electricity, and you've got other things coming in. I believe this is where the next ransomware lives. Because rather than me trying to infect one or two machines, if I take down the building, go on.
That actually happens already. There's stories in the US of divorced couples because smart buildings are right now more a men's thing. They installed it, they lose their house during divorce. They're starting switching on lights and music during night to terrorize their ex-wives. This is already an ongoing threat. There's people doing it.
But that's people in homes. Now I will say we gave a
that's the small scale that we can.
This is
Famously was attacked through their smart building.
Right, and this then becomes a much different problem, because even if you could take down multiple companies, and if you take down an entire building, am I going to pay quicker? Probably. Will I pay? Because I might not even understand. Now, we did some research, and I'm not going to go into this research now, but there's some research. We uncovered a piece of malware last year called Indestroyer. Now, Indestroyer was in industrial control systems. So the malware was actually an infection on the industrial control system. So not... the infection had come through the management networks, et cetera, but it had got to the device, and it was infecting the industrial control systems protocols that were written 20 years previously. Now, if you put in your smart building today, you've got this smart building you've put in, and it's 20 years' time? How secure do you think those sensors are going to feel then? Because they'll still be there. However, all the other equipment in the building, the network hubs, the PCs, the other infrastructure, will have all been replaced. Because it will be on a 5-year cycle. I can tell you now the building infrastructure will be on a lot longer depreciation cycle. So it's got to last a lot longer. So there's a whole new threat here coming.
Why did you mention smart buildings being the threat landscape and not
Well, critical infrastructure is a whole nother subject. So you've got the black energy, you've got the industry blackouts in the Ukraine, and critical infrastructure is an issue. Critical infrastructure is more seen as a government, I would say more seen as a government issue. It's as much political and a state issue, whereas building security affects every one of you in the room, because every one of you work in a building like this and your companies work in a building like this. So we could have the discussion about state. Yeah, and it's an interesting topic. So in the 2 weeks prior to Black Hat this year in the US, the Department of Homeland Security ran 8 briefings on power grid disruption by malicious actors. So the fact they ran 8 briefings in separate parts of the US in a 2-week period, yeah, it's a problem, isn't it? Yeah, and it's a problem everybody needs to understand. Is it possible? Yeah, absolutely. But is it likely to be done by somebody writing malware that's going to affect us? No, it's likely to be done by a state actor, or some, you know. And we try not to get into attribution, by the way, yeah, ever, because you never know who's who in that state world either. So, will cyber criminals use ML and AI? Absolutely, of course they will. And actually, we ask people that question. Now, interestingly, we talked about packing malware earlier on. Packing malware, so if I pack malware and then try and stick it through a machine learning algorithm, it becomes a lot harder. Just out of interest, us at Eset, we don't just look at the malware. You know, the piece of malware comes in, you look at it, you identify it. We don't. We actually run through emulation still. We take a DNA swipe at it. So we look at the output of the emulation, we look at the behavior of how it might run, and we actually look, then we take all the data and then we stick it through the machine learning algorithm and make a decision on it at the end of that process. So it's not just looking at you're not just taking one sample, looking at the code in the sample and going, yeah, maybe not. And let me give you an example of that. In 2003, there was a piece of malware called, I think it was Swizzer. And Swizzer was a polymorphic virus that repacked itself every 60 seconds. Right. Now imagine if I was a cyber criminal and I could actually take this and I started using some form of AI on it. Now imagine if I was actually not just looking at repacking it. Now imagine if I was looking and saying, well, from the data, everybody's detecting it, but they're not detecting this, and I can see vulnerabilities over here, and I can see this, that, and the other. Suddenly I can start creating this malware that morphs itself, maybe even combines itself with other malware, yeah? and starts becoming a completely different variant. And I can do it far quicker, maybe, than the machines on the other side. So now you've got this issue that actually if cyber criminals start using AI truly, which they probably will, because I think we probably all agree that it is a business. They're making money from it. And when there's money to be made, somebody will start doing new things. Then, yeah. And so here we ask people whether, sorry, I've lost which slide I'm on. I'm going to need to read it. I can't read it there. I haven't got my glasses. Yeah. Increase the number of, will AI increase the number of attacks? Yes, it will. If you can see, the vast majority of people agree. And here you'll see, are they going to become more difficult to detect? Yes. Yeah, the vast majority of people agree that they're going to become harder to detect as well. And whether they're harder to, 70% of people agree with it, it's going to be harder to detect. Now, what about social engineering? Yeah, 5 minutes. I'm going to skip a slide. So social engineering, super interesting, phishing emails and stuff like that. I think David actually covered some of this if you were in the room prior to that. So I'm going to skip this piece. But the only thing I would say is nearly every big cyber attack you see has a human element of issue in it. All the data breaches, somebody's clicked on something, somebody's opened an email. Unfortunately, you know, the human element here as well. The last thing I'm going to leave you, because we've only got 5 minutes left, I'm going to leave you with this one. It's monoculture. Yeah. Now, why do I think this is an issue? So the cybersecurity industry moves towards AI and machine learning because the amount of cyber attacks, you have to move in this direction. So now you've got giant companies in here who have huge amounts of data, who turn and say, we can protect you, we can build you these defenses. But the problem is then you're all using the same data to protect yourself. So now you end up with monoculture. So monoculture is typically an agricultural term where it's about single crop in a single location, and it's grown year after year. And the problem with monoculture is disease becomes resistant, pests know where to go, and you end up with bad crops. And that's why, if you look, farmers rotate their crops, they rotate their livestock in different fields, they move things around to stop monoculture. Well, monoculture in the cybersecurity industry, I will move to, I'll explain the baked beans slide afterwards if anybody wants that. This is monoculture. If everybody in the room started using the same security solution, so say in our homes we all use the same burglar alarm, same front door lock, we look like this. So a burglar comes along and he attacks house number 1, works out how the burglar alarm works. Or maybe he's got great machine learning. Maybe if we put this back in malware, he's got great machine learning. He understands how to attack the first company down here, and he finds a vulnerability. He can get to everybody using the same system because you're all using the same data or the same algorithms to protect yourself. Now, if you have some diversity, it becomes a little bit more complex. So if suddenly half of you use company A and half of you use company B, but there's still huge amounts of profit that could potentially be gained. So now you've got these clever cyber criminals using data to go and attack you, and you've got these dominant players, not a good scenario. That is why the cybersecurity industry needs true diversity. And it's right, you'll think, that vendor stood up there in turn and said, we should all use different products. You should. Some of you should use ours, some of you should, or you should have layered products. And the reason being is because once you have a picture like this, actually you get less infection. Now, there was a really good study on this. The Polytechnic of Montreal did a study. They took data from 1 billion Windows devices in 2015. They did this with Microsoft. And they then trimmed it down to 200 randomized data from 200 million randomized machines. And they looked at dominance of market presence. And they found that when there's a dominant player providing security in any industry, in any geography, there was a higher infection rate. Because the cyber criminal is using the data to work out where he can best go and attack with that specific piece of malware. So the cyber criminal back in 2015 was already clever enough to be using data to work out where his malware worked best. So are the cyber criminals going to use machine learning AI? Yeah, absolutely. Because that in fact proved it. What was interesting was in areas where you had true diversity, where there was a true mix of vendors and nobody had dominant place, even the people that didn't have protection were better protected. There was less infection rates. So even the people that didn't have AV software on their machines had less infection rates. So kind of interesting that the cyber criminal there actually turns their attention to where he will make the most money. I'm going to go back to my just for the love of it. The cybersecurity industry, if we make a mistake, it's devastating. If I make a mistake, by the way, when you're shopping, it's not devastating, is it? If I put two lots of baked beans in here, machine learning doesn't make any issue here. If we make a mistake in our machine learning, it's huge. You get big instances. And I'll talk to you about WannaCry afterwards. Thank you.